Hey everyone, welcome to my top 5 tips for climbing out of low elo video. Obviously, there are many different ways to get out of low elo. There's a lot of things you can improve on, but in this video, I'm going to try cover the 5 things that I think will apply to literally every low elo player. So the first thing, and something I really don't see talked about enough, is just having an overall plan for each game. It doesn't need to be super specific, but having some idea of how you want the game to go is really, really important for building up consistency, and that is absolutely what solo queue is all about. So I think there's a couple ways to do this. The first is just having some kind of higher level view of what your champion's identity is. So this can mean like what your goals are in the laning phase, what your goals are in team fighting. Again, you really don't need to get specific about it. Just like, are you meant to play safe in the laning phase? Are you meant to flank in team fights? Just having some kind of idea of what your champion is meant to do goes a really long way. I think also if you are aware of what kind of items you spike on, it can make this a lot easier. So if you spike on one item, if you spike on first base, if you spike on 2 items, anything like that, it makes it very clear for something to work towards. The second part is setting some benchmarks for yourself. So I think it's really good if you add in some consistent benchmarks to your playstyle. Obviously, you might not meet them every game, but something like going for, say, 80 CS at 10 minutes and then like 170 CS at 20 minutes, it gives you something consistent to work towards. And it's also something you can measure. Like, are you getting more and more consistent at reaching these benchmarks? And if you can reach, especially CS benchmarks, it puts you in a really good state to carry the game, especially in lower elo when so many people are just missing CS for free. Next, I think it's really, really important that you focus your improvement on learning the most basic fundamentals. So in my mind, farming, laning, and team fighting will provide the building blocks for anyone to get out of low elo. So I think choosing one of these fundamentals and focusing on improving one at a time will go a really long way. I do have guides to all of these on my channel, so I recommend checking those out. And in those videos, I break these fundamentals down into smaller parts, so it's a bit easier for you to focus on learning just like one piece at a time. And I think it's really important that you focus on these fundamentals first, because I think a lot of people in lower elo, they either try and learn like some higher level concepts without working on the basics first. And so it's just like sort of hard to build on these if you don't have solid foundations to begin with. If you are focusing on things that just don't occur as often as these, if you say focus on something that only occurs in 1 out of every 5 games, you're just not going to see those like immediate LP returns. Compared to when if you're just focusing on stuff like farming, laning, and team fighting that just affects every single game that you play. So I really think if you are spending time improving, really focusing on these fundamentals will go a long way. Following on from that, improving in general is a lot easier if you keep your champion pool somewhat limited. I think it's pretty important, especially in low elo, that you don't play too many champs. Try and keep your champion pool between 1 and 3, I would say. Too many champs is just going to make things really difficult for you. At the beginning, there's so much stuff to learn, and so you should be focused on just learning the game. You don't want to be trying to learn like a difficult champion at the same time as trying to learn all these fundamentals, and you really don't want to be changing up your champions too often. Obviously, it's fine to introduce a new champion every now and then, but just don't be swapping every single game because it's just going to make things too difficult for you. You really want to get to the point where playing your champion is just second nature, and you can focus on learning the game. If you need to, you can play some simple champions so that you can focus on learning the game. Champions like Annie always come up, and they come up for a reason, right? These champions are very good for learning the game because they're very simple to play, and you can focus kind of all your energy and all your focus into just learning the game. I think that's super, super important, guys, because one thing I learned as I got higher and higher elo is it became a lot easier for me to learn new champs and understand new playstyles once I actually became good at the game. If you can build up your fundamentals, it's very easy to play pretty much any champion you want. If you've got very poor fundamentals, though, you have to learn every single champion in its own kind of microcosm. You're going to have to learn everything about the game through the lens of that champion because you have no fundamentals to rely on. Another thing I see ignored even by higher elo players is the mental aspect of the game. So in my opinion, taking steps to at first prevent tilt, and if you do get tilted, mitigate that tilt is really, really important. I'm not saying move to the mountains and become a monk, but I think there's a few things you can do. For example, turning off allied chat I found was really, really good for helping prevent getting tilted in the first place. And then if you do get tilted, I found that just taking a 5-minute break pretty much reset me. Obviously, it's different for every person, but I think there's like very small steps that you can take that make a very big difference. And I think this actually made a pretty big difference to my win rate as well. And I think that's super important because, again, coming back to that consistency factor, if you can consistently play the game in a somewhat, regular mindset as opposed to someone that's tilted or frustrated, it is going to make a big difference, especially because you're probably going to be playing a lot of games over the season. So the more games that you can play at your top level, the better it's going to be, both for winning and for improving. Finally, there's some out-of-game stuff that you can do right now to improve your win rate. I think one thing is making sure you have an up-to-date item build and runes, etc. An easy way to fix this is just to go to Games of Legends or go to OPGG, like check what the pros are playing, just kind of check what the meta build is, just because League is an ever-evolving game. Champions, runes, and items get changed a lot from patch to patch, so oftentimes builds that were meta a few months ago are no longer meta. And when I'm watching a lot of low elo plays, I see a lot of either just bad builds to begin with or builds that just haven't been meta in a while. And I think that's a really easy way that you can quickly just take 5 minutes to check that and see if you've got the best runes and items. Another way you can kind of accelerate your improvement is by watching guides for champions or watching streams or something like that. I think just spamming games, as I've said before, is the least efficient way of improving. Obviously, you still have to play a lot of games, but there's a lot of information that you can get that you probably wouldn't otherwise find if you just like watch guides for a champion or you ask questions in a stream. Twitch.tv/shocklol, by the way. It can be a really good way to augment your improvement. If you play some games, you watch some guides and you try and apply that information. I think that's super, super important. I think a lot of people get stuck in the solo queue grind, and pretty much it's just the slowest way of improving, and there's so much information out there that can speed things up for you. So guys, that is going to be it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you have any tips of your own to share, please leave them in the comments below. Also, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.